Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. In another week dominated by events in North Africa and the Middle East, we'll focus on the popular uprisings. In a minute, I'll be talking to the chairman of Oman's State Council in a rare television moment. And in a change of tone, I'll be meeting the celebrated Irish dancer, Michael Flatley. But we begin with the uprising. The Jasmine Revolution, the Arab Spring, the Awakening. Commentators and academics are all lining up to try and define the change which is sweeping across North Africa and the Middle East, from Libya to Bahrain, Yemen to Tunisia. Earlier, I talked to Prince Hassan of Jordan, chairman of the West Asia and North Africa Forum. The right man at the right moment. I started by asking him whether this movement reminded him perhaps of the Prague Spring, the thaw in Prague in Czechoslovakia of 1968.
I think the difference between the Prague Spring and the Arab Spring is that whereas oil is all conducive to international political strategy, in this region, oil is incompatible, it seems to me, with democracy. And this is the basic concern, that everything that runs machinery in the industrialized world is run by oil. And the time has come to recognize that in Prague you had an Eastern European civil society, which 20 years later, I just returned from Warsaw myself, and the Poles are about to lead the European Union. They have really something to show for this transition. We have not even started our transition. It's still a wish list of collective will being respected by institutions which don't exist.
But it really is a situation people have got to realize that those two things, oil and democracy, as you said so memorably just a moment ago, are incompatible.
That is my feeling. People, have said Islam and democracy are incompatible, but Islam is inspired by a spirit and an ethic which is entirely compatible with social equity. In fact, it's, in a sense, the movement for the dispossessed. But I really get the impression that with sovereign wealth funds and Islamic banking spending trillions of dollars, not least of all money that is spent on arms purchases, somebody has to talk about how to resolve this human dignity deficit between the very rich and the very poor. And I think that is the main problem. In the past, we focused on oil, we focused on the Palestine question, we've signed treaties which have placed Israel in a situation of an upper hand where the so-called process is almost no longer exists. And, I think the time has come to recognize the Iranian dilemma, for example. The Iranians have said, well, the Arabs are trying to clone our revolution. Today they realize that the Arabs are expressing their own will, and I think that they are also beginning to feel the effect of a democratizing youth movement.
And in a year or two, if we're talking like this and looking back, how much will have changed? How much IE is changing at the moment?
The patronage aspect of throwing money at problems is the style of those countries who have the funds. Right. And if that doesn't change, if containing extremism is not seen in the context of empowering people, empowering citizens, men and women, I don't think that the non-violent movement, which we've seen up till now, is going to remain non-violent. Unfortunately, Libya is a proof of that. And there is a vacuum of hope that has to be filled. In Egypt, for example, if the situation turns lawless, they might end up opting for military authority again. And that is, again, a worry. But if the world is genuinely interested in a regional cohesion fund, a social charter, a West Asia North Africa Union, possibly to beef up the Arab League or to replace it in a certain sense, an institutional move which includes all countries except for Israel and the Palestinians who have not yet come to terms. I think that over the next 2 years we might find a regional Conference for Security and Cooperation in the West Asia, Middle East region is possible.
There is change going on almost everywhere, do you think? I mean, there will be changes in the ruling strategy, the ruling organization of many countries over the next 2 years.
Well, I think that the ruling strategy, as you put it, or the ruling figures simply don't get it up till now. They play or pay lip service to change, although some of the change, again, is a little bit worth studying. I mean, if you look at Gene Sharp or Eugene Sharp in Boston and the non-violent movement, you have a foil to the Islamists and the Salafis calling for change, which is a sort of non-violent secular movement. And when I look at the bill of goods, when you say change, as we've heard from the Twitters and the bloggers, and I've met with many of these people, should be towards constitutional rule, towards social equity, and then you find an odd man out, or is it an odd man out? The head of state has to go. So it goes from 0 to 10 on a scale of 10, and that's what gives these rulers the worry that really the ultimate power play is to remove them from office. But I think that they too can change if they can only focus on the constitutionality and the full sharing of rights and privileges that all people should have. But in a region of 15 to 29, that is youth, men and women, largely unemployed, we need 100 million job opportunities in 10 years' time, according to the World Bank. It's not going to come by continuing to spend money on weapons, which we can't even send to Libya, because obviously the Americans have asked the Saudis to send weapons to Libya. I think that there's going to be a lot of reticence about that.
And in terms of everything that's gone on in the way of reform in the area and so on, would you expect Jordan to become part of that as well, as in terms of reforms and so on, and keeping with the current mood?
Absolutely. Either we go with the flow or we face a very bumpy ride ahead. And in the past, we have been initiators of change, drivers of change. And I think today the young and dynamic Jordanian population has a lot to do.
You see the future as peaceful with slight reforms or in your own land in Jordan? Peaceful and some reform, yes?
I think with major reforms, I think there will be, there is a vacuum of hope. People are waiting to see that vacuum being filled, and we all have to put our words into action. We can't talk about a better life, we have to realize it with our own people.
Your Royal Highness, thank you very much indeed for being with us, and that's a memorable phrase there that you said a couple of times today, that there's a vacuum of hope, and well, let's hope the vacuum is soon filled. Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. We hope to hear from you again soon.
Thank you.
Our next topic is the Lord of the Dance. He's one of the world's most successful Irish dancers, a man who revolutionized traditional Irish dance and took it to a global audience. I'm talking, of course, about Michael Flatley, whose Lord of the Dance show has been seen by 50 million people in over 60 different countries, making it the biggest grossing dance show in the history of entertainment. Now, even more people will be able to see it with the release of a 3D film of Lord of the Dance. And I'm delighted to say Michael's with us now. But before we meet him, let's see him in action. I think they liked it, don't you?
I think they did,
I think they did. Now, tell me, this is 3D. Does that make any difference in the way you have to do it?
Well, it does. You know, people may not think so, but we went through a lot of changes to
really?
prepare for this. Yeah. In fact, when we did signed up for the last tour, it was when I was rehearsing. I decided to do the film, and only because it was 3D. I was always afraid that if I filmed the show in 2D, it wouldn't translate. You wouldn't get the energy that you get in the live arena. So when I saw 3D, it gave me that little insight. And 3 times as many people, 3 times as many cameras, 3 times as expensive, but well worth it, I think, for the end product. I'm my own worst critic, and I viewed it at a preview recently, and I must say that that show really stands up, and you get to feel the energy between the performers and the audience, which is vital, I think, for the feel-good factor at the show.
Is it true that, as I read here, that the number of dance taps you can do in a second is 35?
Yes.
That's amazing.
It is, but nothing's impossible. The way I look at that is, it sounds very impressive in the press, and it's a great tagline. It doesn't make me a great dancer. You know, it's great to be able to go fast, and I'm delighted that I have that record, or had that record once in my life. And it sounds, as I say, impressive for media, but it's not all that important.
No, but what about yourself? You're still dancing. You've been dancing recently, and so on. And I mean,
we just finished.
Dancers sometimes retire in their 20s, which you didn't do.
No, most of my dancers will retire by 25.
Will they?
Yeah, most of the dancers, over 90%. Some, maybe we've had a handful that have made it as far as 30. And I wasn't so lucky. I didn't get my break until I was 35 when I created Riverdance, and it all kind of started there for me. So it's, you take what God gives you.
Yeah, but that's amazing, starting at 35 and still going strong.
50's the new 30. That's the way I
believe you.
Yeah, 50's the new 30.
Yeah. Before a performance, which is going to be frantic in all sorts of physical ways and so on, do you do anything to prepare yourself, to get in the mood, to have a drink of something special, or what?
Yeah, people, that's a great question. People don't understand when the average person comes to see the show and you're sitting waiting and relaxing and waiting for the curtain to open. I have to be at full speed, the speed of the end of the show, by the opening number. So my very first solo has to be like a shot out of a cannon. Yeah. So I've already danced up to full speed for almost 2 hours in preparation to get ready to come out there. So there's no magic formula. It's hard work and believing in it and doing it. And but I've always said this. Listen, if you love what you do, work is not work. You know, it's my pleasure to do that. People always say, do you get nervous? You're only nervous if you're unprepared. Yeah. If you're prepared, you can't wait to get out there. And that's how I feel every night. If there's one thing we do in our live shows, is we give people more than their money's worth. And at the end of the show, they give it all back with their applause. And for me, that's what translates so perfectly to the 3D. For me, it was capturing that magic between the audience and the stage performers. That's what comes across in this film. That's what makes it special.
But what about the mystery illness? How did you conquer that? I mean, I wrote down this quote from you saying, I couldn't perform, I couldn't walk, I couldn't move, couldn't do anything. I was really bad, and I just knew something was radically wrong. My body had simply had enough. I'm convinced the reason I got ill was because I was burnt out and so on. How did you fight that back? Yeah,
that was a really tough time for me. That was really scary. And for a year, I was literally flat on my back. And nobody could give me the answers. I had the world's best doctors. I had the best people. God, I had the greatest team, and none of them were the most wonderful, caring people. And they were able to tell me that it was no known virus, nothing that they were aware of, but nobody could pinpoint exactly what it was. They thought it might have been a post-viral fatigue syndrome. Anyhow, I went back to my home in Cork to try and recuperate, and there were times I would be lying on the couch, and my wife would come in. Now, we're just newly married. And she'd say, can I get you a cup of tea? Are you feeling all right? And I would literally be trying with all my might to answer, but nothing would come out. And I'd be looking at her, and she'd put her hand and say, don't worry, I'll get you something to drink. I literally, that was how bad it was. And I hadn't been outside the door in 8 months. And so I remember anyhow, I called a young lad from County Clare to come over who works with energy healing, because all my life on tour I've had people with good energy come to work with me and massage people that always have good energy. So I thought, why not go back to that? That's what brought you here. And I did. A young lad named Michael O'Doherty. And he came over and he worked on the energy fields around my body a little bit. And the next thing I know, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, he was sitting drinking a cup of tea next to me. And I said, was I asleep long? He said, about 2 hours, which I couldn't believe. He said, do you want to go for a walk? I said, yeah. And didn't even think. And next thing I know, I have a 1.5 mile driveway. We walked the whole driveway back and forth talking. Never noticed that I hadn't done it in 8 months. Came back to the house. Every day since that, it has gotten better. Every day.
And are your legs still insured?
Yes, they are.
How much?
25 million pounds. Yeah.
That's a bargain.
Well, you know what? Again, it all sounds great in the press, and it's wonderful for a sales tool, but it's strictly business. You know yourself. If I go down, my tours go down, and so that's why that is. But it's a good press hook.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they certainly look very much easily worth 25 million pounds.
Well, thank you. You're
great to see you again.
And you, my dear friend.
Good luck with Lord of the Dance all around the world.
Please, God, thank you so much.
The protest movement, which has swept Arab states, has even reached the wealthy and previously stable Gulf state of Oman. The country of just 3 million people is ruled by an absolute monarch, a very popular absolute monarch, in fact, Sultan Qaboos bin Said Al Said, who has absolute powers, appoints all ministers, and takes most of the big decisions himself. During the 40 years of his rule, he's used Oman's oil money very constructively to develop the country. But protesters in the capital Muscat and the second city Sohar are demanding more jobs, greater democracy, and an end to corruption. Joining me now from Muscat in a rare interview is Dr. Yahya al-Mantheri, the chairman of the State Council of Oman. Dr. Mantheri, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We've just heard in all the papers and so on about the protests, the surprising fact of the protests in Muscat and Oman, and how many people, in fact, in all of those protests, the papers said that 1 man had died during the protests, and then another paper said 6 people had died. Obviously, even 1 is too many, but what is the accurate situation now?
First of all, the events that took place in the Sultanate of Oman are just protests and sit-ins which are peaceful. The law guarantees these protests, the right to protest, the freedom of expression, and the freedom to protest via peaceful means. Undoubtedly, what happened in the city of Sohar, in the death of one of the youths, in an unfortunate incident, we are very sorry for this. As you know, His Majesty the Sultan has ordered from the beginning of the protests not to intervene with the peaceful demonstrations. There is also an investigation taking place with the General Prosecutor to ascertain the events of this incident. The prosecution has declared before the masses that the investigation will be transparent and clear, and it will be announced to society in a clear manner.
So that, in fact, summing that up, you're confirming that there was, as far as you're aware, only 1 loss of life, yes?
Yes, indeed. Up until now, and inshallah, there will be no more than that.
Right, and as you've mentioned, Doctor, the Sultan has already taken a number of steps reacting to the protesters' demands. He's replaced a number of ministers. He's promised 50,000 new jobs. He's increasing the minimum wage. He seems to be doing everything he can to bring an end to this divisive situation.
Indeed, yes, it is. His Majesty the Sultan has taken under several steps, and he has made some directions. These steps are summed up by the social aspect in generating 50,000 jobs for the Omanis in the private and public sector, and this issue has started to be executed, and there is a response, a good response from the private sector and the public sector in order to make jobs for the Omanis in jobs that suit their qualifications, and the minimum wage has also been increased, and some monies have been given to job seekers in order to help them until they find a job. We have reformed the cabinet in order to introduce some of the Shura councils who have been elected, and some new figures, and we hope from this government to undertake its role to tackle all the issues related to the livelihood of the Omani society.
Do you think that these protests will continue for a bit longer or not? And even more important than that, do you expect the Sultan to introduce some more measures of democracy into the kingdom? Will there be, do you think, a move towards greater democracy where you are?
Without a doubt, His Majesty is eager to introduce reforms, whether they are political or social, and to take their course. As you know, in his speech before the State Council, he confirmed that the process of progress will continue in the Sultanate. His voice was very clear with regard to fighting corruption and administrative exploitation. These points, we found them are introduced within the law by introducing certain competencies to the Shura Council, by generating institutions such as the monitoring apparatus and independence of the prosecution department. This moves towards giving more competences and more transparency and more contribution and participation with the citizens among all their classes.
Do you think it is likely that either while the Sultan is in power or his successor is in power, that Muscat and Oman will become a constitutional monarchy, that the new leader will be a constitutional monarch, rather like the Queen of England?
Without a doubt, it is now premature to talk about this point. The basic law of the state has divided the authorities and has determined the roles. And as I mentioned earlier, the Sultanate is moving towards giving more competencies, wider competencies, to the elected institutions in order to participate in the political process. It is a periodical matter, and Oman is moving, thank God, towards this in a clear manner and steady steps. However, at the same time, it has its own characteristics, social characteristics, which is taken into consideration.
And that's it for this particular program. My thanks to all of my guests that you've just seen. Do join me again for the next Frost Over the World.